I think we all have favorite clients and least favorite clients. And that will probably always be true because human beings are human beings, right? We have different people that we connect with. We have different issues that excite us. And even if you are in one practice area, there might be different types of activities within a practice area that you find exciting. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast, where today we're going to be talking about 3 ways that your current clients are repelling your ideal clients. All right. So let's dive in. So first, why are we choosing this topic? Why are we talking about current clients when we're really in the goal of trying to get new clients? Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing that's really important to understand. There is a universe in your law firm that you are creating, whether you are intentional about it or you're just going about your day to day. And for most of us, we are so busy, we have so many things to do that we oftentimes are not as intentional as we could be and frankly should be in terms of creating what we want, right? We are oftentimes running from person to person, task to task, client to client. We're paying the bills. We're negotiating with contractors. We're meeting with marketing folks. We're filled with activity. And I'm not trying to tell you, by the way, to live a life of leisure where you have no activity in your business, okay? I know there are a lot of lifestyle law coaches out there that will tell you, sit at the beach with your computer, work 2 hours a week. And if that's what you want to do, that's great. But when you're building to having that lifestyle while also having the amount of money that you want, there's work involved, okay? Dirty little secret, whole lot of folks out there that are promoting the 4-hour work week version of the lawyer lifestyle. I'm just going to be very blunt with you. That does not exist until you have created the ecosystem that can create that for you, okay? So while you are creating whatever ecosystem you want, while you are creating America's next top big law firm, or you're creating America's next top lawyer lifestyle firm, you're going to have to put in some time and some effort. And while you are doing that, there are some very specific, very strategic things that you can do that you should be doing in order to get to the ideal clients for you. Now, when I say ideal clients, that does not mean that every single person that walks through your door is going to be ideal at all times, right? I think we all have favorite clients and least favorite clients, and that will probably always be true because human beings are human beings, right? We have different people that we connect with. We have different issues that excite us. And even if you are in one practice area, there might be different types of activities within a practice area that you find exciting, right? You might be really compelled by drafting esoteric documents in order to handle some high net worth transactions. Or you might be the kind of person that loves like getting into the weeds and like figuring out the negotiated plan between you and another attorney for your respective clients that are in a B2C type of conflict, right? Whatever your issue is, whatever your practice area is, it really doesn't matter. What we really want you to understand is that while you are creating in your law firm, when you are serving certain people, it is really, really hard to shift into serving other people unless you are intentional about it, right? When you are in the shallow end and you're playing with the minnows, it is really hard for the big whale to come swim up to you and miraculously become your ideal client. So you have to think about what's ideal for you. And by the way, ideal for you might not be rich, might not be powerful, might not be a business. So, this is agnostic to what type of client you serve. We have a large following here at Law Firm Mentor, and we have clients who serve folks at a $500 price point. And we have folks who are serving clients at a $50,000 price point. And those are the minimum starting places for each of those businesses. And both of those businesses are crushing it. Okay. So you don't have to choose a particular type of client in order to have a satisfying law firm. All you have to do is decide what kind of client you want and then go after that type of client. So, having said that, let us now talk about the 3 ways that your current clients are repelling your ideal clients. So, strategy number 1, reason number 1 for why your current clients are repelling your future clients, it is that different avatars have different needs. Now, this is pretty simple, right? Intellectually, I think we all understand that a grandmother in her 80s who is coming in to update her will, or perhaps a codicil, is probably going to have very different needs than a 25-year-old entrepreneur who comes in and wants to do estate planning, right? They have some very basic common needs that are driven by the legal landscape of whatever law you're practicing. But they're going to have different needs as humans, right? They're going to like different communication styles. They're going to have a different level of knowledge and comfort with technology. They're probably going to like a different atmosphere. And by atmosphere, I am talking about what they experience of your law firm, whether your law firm is brick and mortar or it's virtual. So a good example of this, I have one client who I love her dearly. She's a former client, but she has still remained in contact with me over all these years. And one of the things that she first told me that she wanted in her law firm was matching furniture. That was a big thing for her because when she launched her law firm, she decided she was going to do it all on her own, even though she had a financially successful partner, and even though they had family wealth. She was like, I want to, feel like I built this myself. So she took the resources from clients that paid her and she bought furniture for her waiting area, and she bought what she could afford at the time. So she went to, I don't remember what store, Pier 1 Import, Home Goods, wherever, and she picked up a sofa. And then like maybe another couple months later, she had some more money. She picked up an end table and so forth, right? So she kind of duct taped her aesthetic together. And for the clients that she was serving initially, that was perfectly fine. They liked that it was a homey feel. When they walked into her office, they felt like they were sitting at a girlfriend's house, right? It was had warm tone colors on the walls. The furniture was not new, we'll say. I'm not going to say anything more than that. I'll just say it was not new. But it wasn't old and raggedy, right? It was comfortable. Everything about her office, everything about her energy said comfort, which you would think, hey, that's a great thing. Who doesn't want to be comfortable when they're dealing with their lawyer? Except she also was in a practice area where she served some pretty high-end folks, and she wanted to serve more of them. And I said to her, speaking as a high-end folk, that if I came into her office, I don't think I would be inclined to work with her. I would be turned off. And not because of her as a person, I would like as a person. But when I look for my professionals, when I'm looking for the people who are going to be advising me, the people who are going to protect me from legal challenges, who are going to launch legal challenges for me, those folks, I want to be of a certain caliber. And there are certain status indicators that tell me that. Now, you might say, let's just put it out there. A whole lot of folks might say, status is bullshit. There are brilliant people who have used worn down furniture just as much as there are dummies who are in suits in modern buildings. And that might very well be true. But unfortunately, that is not how most people will think about it. Most people see status indicators, status that has been afforded by our society, they see status indicators as accurate. So if I meet someone and I see them in a polished outfit and they have a very, very well articulated vernacular, and I come into an environment that is pristine and clean and has sharp lines and modern decor that matches, I'm going to have a different impression than if I walk into what feels like a hodgepodge of a living room, right? And here's the thing. You get to choose whichever one you want. You're not relegated to saying, I must look like this or my law firm must be that. But your law firm aesthetic should fit the people you want to serve. And so if you're serving people right now, you could have a very thriving business. You could have, four, five, $600,000 worth of revenue coming in, and maybe you're at a 15 to 20% profit margin, right? You could be doing great. However, you might say, even with all of that, I still want a different type of experience with my clients. I want different types of clients. And if you do, then you really should strongly consider making a change to that. Now, the other thing I think is really important when we're talking about how we are showing up for our avatars is that there's a certain energy. And I want to talk about energy a little bit later in today's program, but there is a certain energy that comes in an environment, right? Certain environments are more high octane than others. So, if you just talk to an interior designer, even little things like red is a very powerful color. It's an energizing color. So if you're dealing with people in distress, you might not want red to be your primary color. Except if you're someone like me who loves the color red, you might say, I'm going to have a conference room that's going to have a red all over it so that when I bring people into my conference room for meetings with me, whether I am being a part of a multi-party, multi-attorney negotiation, or I am trying to impress a high-tier client, I want that power color to stick out. And I remember I got advice against that when I first started working with an interior designer on not our current office, but 2 offices ago. I remember it was the first time we had moved into a much bigger office. We took 9,000 square feet of space in the richest town in America. And so I was, really trying to live it up, right? And price tags went with living it up. But I remember I met with an interior designer at a furniture store and they said, red is a very energizing color and law is already a stressful area and you're going to stress people out more. And quite the contrary, we used red as a primary color, but I was able to soften it in areas, mixed it with reds and pinks when it was time to have the warm feel conference room where people needed to engage and feel taken care of by our sales team. But when it was time for me to be in charge, when you needed to know that something was wrong, whether I was meeting with an employee or I was meeting with a vendor or I was meeting with an adversary, you got, the big D energy of bright red that came all over my large conference room. And, sometimes you have to follow your gut on those things. And I think it was the right decision. But point saying, all of that is just to reiterate point number 1, which is that when your clients are different avatars, they have different needs. And so if you are serving a clientele right now and you want to shift to a different clientele, be very careful. It may be time for you to shift everything about how you are designing your atmosphere for the folks that are going to be coming in. Okay. Now, having said that, there are some other things that we do very inadvertently as lawyers all the time that is killing our opportunity to get our ideal clients through the door. Okay. So how else might our current clients be repelling our ideal clients? Well, number 2 is that messages tend to permeate all the channels where we communicate. Okay. So in other words, what you put out is oftentimes reflective of what you get back. Kind of makes sense, right? If I'm out on 5 or 6 different social media platforms, it is going to be very challenging for me to have one platform where I am talking about my low ticket offer, where I'm getting people through the door just so that they can get a taste and feel. And on another platform, I am talking about that rich bitch lifestyle. Where this is, the sky is the limit and I serve the upper echelon, right? Those, again, I'm talking about economics because in that particular way, most people can see, feel, and sense the difference, but it applies to different things too. It's not just about economics. It also applies to our demographics as people. So if you are speaking the language of being anti-government, you also are not going to likely attract the very corporate conservative type person, right? Unless that person is also anti-government. And now in the world we live in, that also could be a thing. But by and large, you have to think about, this is really going to the psychographics of the people that you are talking to, right? And so when you are crafting messages, now this is when I say you, I'm talking about your business, but this is challenging for professional marketers as well. So if you hire a marketing company, know that you might be very well hamstringing them if you were to say to them, hey, I want to go after Susie Smith homemaker whose husband makes 5 figures and they are supporting a family of 4. But I also want to go after, Steve, the serial entrepreneur who has 6 companies and is building his 7th company and has just sold his 5th company for 8 figures, right? Different people, different needs, right? So that kind of relates to the first topic that we talked about. But here's what is unique and specific about number 2. Okay, when we talk about messaging, it's important that we recognize that the messaging that we put out will draw in not just who we want, but sometimes it will draw in the antidote. Okay, so it is possible that you can get more business than just what you are talking about by talking about things in a very specific way, right? So for right now in our world, immigration is a hot button issue, right? It is something that the Trump administration has taken on and has taken on with fervor. Whether you agree or disagree with the particular way that they are approaching it is not the subject of this podcast. So let us not go there. Okay. But for our immigration attorneys, I've never met one who is not offended by the current approach to immigration, at least the languaging, the messaging of how things are being done. Okay. So I want you to think about that because that is a very stark example of how messaging going out draws in a certain type of avatar and draws in a certain type of person. And so if you are the person who has a very pragmatic approach and says, we need border control, but also we need a pathway to immigration to support our economy. And here are the ways that I can help you do that. That's a very different message than, F the government for trying to keep people away from the American dream because this whole country is founded on immigrants, right? If you think about those two messages, they're polarizing. And I want you to think about the ways in which you, through your messaging, speaking to your avatar, might be creating some polarization with other folks that you might want to serve. Now, that does not mean I think you ought to pick a nice little conservative lean in the middle and be as tepid as possible. I do think you have to stand for something. I do think that it is impossible for you to be all about going after the deadbeat dads while also being the social justice warrior for the fathers' rights who have been trampled on by our court system, right? 2 different messages. Pick a lane. Okay, you might get a little bit of usufruct from some of the folks who are not in your lane, but who want you on their side because they want to put something out that is consistent with your message to make them look better, right? So if you go after deadbeat dads, a man might want to hire you just so that he can appear not to be a deadbeat dad, right? So you can get business from your message, even if it is not the intended target of your message. But your message is going to need to be very clear. And if your message is clearly going in one direction and it's attracting in a certain type of client, those clients are going to typically be the opposite, or at least very distinct and very different than that ideal or that other type of client that you might want to serve. So be careful about your messaging and make sure that your current clients are not giving you those talking points, because usually, we go to our current clients for what are their needs, what are their challenges, what are their difficulties. That's how we start crafting messages that will appeal to them. When you start putting that out, you oftentimes will get stuff on the other side that's not so pretty. All right. Third and final way that your current clients are killing and repelling your opportunity to get in your ideal clients. And this is about energy. I referenced energy earlier. Now we're going to really talk about it. Okay. So energy expended is worse than energy fluctuating. Okay. So here's what I mean by that. Think about two very distinct days. Okay. You might have a day in your company. Okay. For a moment, we're going to talk to the litigators because it's a little bit easier to demonstrate with litigators, but it applies to all lawyers, no matter your practice area. It could be transactional, could be subscription based, could be litigation, doesn't matter. Okay. If you come to a day in your law firm and your day is planned that you're going to be in the office all day. And let's say it's a quote run of the mill day, right? You come in, let's say you're in around 8:30, you get your morning coffee, you open up your computer, you set everything up, you get into the flow of things, and you get to work. And you work from thing to thing, right? First you have a meeting, then you have a phone conference, then you have an inner office meeting, then you might be working on a document, then you have another inner office meeting, maybe you have a sales conversation, your day ends with a wrap up with your team, and the day is over. Okay? Sounds like a perfectly lovely day. You didn't go to the bathroom or take lunch, but that's, not neither here nor there. Okay. Now I want you to think about a different day. Think about a different day, a day where you have court, right? And let's say, because again, I said I was going to use my litigators as an example. Your day starts at 8:00 and you at 8:00 go to your office, pick up your file, and then you're off to the courthouse. You drive to the courthouse, you park, you meet your client, you start counseling your client, you and your clients attend the open call at the beginning of the day. You check in on your matter. You're told you're going to be third in line to be seen by the court. Your adversary is there. You go outside. You have a conversation with your adversary. You come back to your client. You relay that conversation. There's some negotiation that goes back and forth in the hallway until your matter is called. Then you get your opportunity. You're standing before the court. You're having your conference. You're saying what you need to be saying. Ultimately, you get a good result, however that is defined. Then you and your adversary have to touch base afterward to draft the order together, or perhaps you're going to be waiting for an order for the court, but you're going to be touching base on notes so that you can keep the case moving after you leave the courthouse. Okay? That court day could be 4 hours or it could be 8 hours. Okay? I don't know your jurisdiction. Many jurisdictions, that could be a full day. But let's say, however long it is, let's say it's most of the day, right? Let's say at the end of the day of your court time, you go back to your office, you debrief your staff on what happened, you scan any documents that you had, you've scheduled your follow-up meeting with your client, and all is right with the world, right? But that was a day where you were moving and shaking the whole day. You're going over here to speak, then you're going over here to speak, then you're going over here to speak, then you're called on the record, then you're going out in the hallway, then you're called back on the record, then you're going back to speak to your client, then you're speaking to your adversary, right? You're bouncing around, a lot of energy, okay? I think that if you were to measure the satisfaction of the lawyer in scenario 1, who was day in the office, versus scenario 2, they were probably going to be pretty close, okay, if they like their jobs. Okay, there are plenty of lawyers that don't like their jobs, but let's assume that each lawyer likes the work that they do. If you like the work that you do, that type of work, even though day 1, scenario 1 was less energy expended, total was probably as fulfilling, if not more even, than litigator's day, which was a lot of energy going a lot of different places. What is almost universally reported when lawyers report malcontent and exhaustion and overwhelm, it's neither of those two scenarios. It's the third scenario. The third scenario is I come in, I have a planned scenario 1 day, right? I'm going to sit down. I have some meetings scheduled. I have some emails to return. I have some phone calls to place. And I walk in at 8:30 and I open up my email and I have a client in great distress who I immediately hop on the phone with, and I get on the phone with that client, and based on what's happened, that client has now need to involve law enforcement, and law enforcement is ultimately going to have to talk to my client later in the day, which means I'm going to have to clear part of my afternoon so I can be with my client when they speak with law enforcement. And oh, by the way, as I'm walking in, I have an employee who walks in and quits. And that employee happens to be somebody who would be normally helping me to transact all the things for the client for whom I am meeting with law enforcement at the end of the day. And as that is happening, I get a phone call from the court. I answer that call, and it turns out I was expected to be at a court proceeding somehow that morning that didn't get calendared for me. And so I am now in my jeans and sweater being told, hey, you have to be here in 30 minutes or else I'm going to sanction you. And your client is here and you're wondering how the F did that happen? And you can't really figure that out right now because you got to figure out how you're going to look presentable going to court in jeans and a sweater. Or maybe you're going to have to swing by home, or maybe somebody's going to have to bring you some clothes while you are rushing yourself over to the courthouse. And in the meantime, you get a call from that same distressed client in the morning, and law enforcement is not willing to wait to interview in the afternoon. They're actually asking that person to come in. And if that person doesn't come in, they're going to go pick her up. And now you have another problem to resolve. And perhaps you have co-counsel, or perhaps you have an associate in your office that can help with that, and perhaps not. But that is how your day unfolds, okay? At the end of that day, you are probably going to feel like you have been raked over the coals. You're going to feel exhausted. Why? Because your energy had to do this, right? There was a fervor of activity, and it wasn't well expended, high paced energy. It was, I have a lull and then I have a high, and then a lull and then a high, and then a lull and then a high, right? And I never get into a groove because every time I take a step, something comes along and knocks the wind out from underneath me. That is what is exhausting. And here's the thing. Some of that, depending on your practice area, may or may not be avoidable. Okay. We all have those days. Okay. I think a lot of times a failure to plan, a failure to systematize is what's creating that, right? So that's ultimately what we help people here with at Law for Mentor. We systematize everything so that things like deadlines and court appearances get diaried and we don't have that kind of problem. But yeah, client getting arrested or client needing you to deal with law enforcement, that could be an emergency that pops up in your practice, depending on what your practice is. But here's the thing. The reason why that was so exhausting for you is because you have either enabled your clients to have a last minute attitude that says, I call my client, I call my lawyer when I'm in distress, and I can go off and create as much distress as possible. So it could be that. Or it could be on the flip side, the idea that as your existing clients are expecting you to show up in a certain way, you are meeting their energy instead of creating the energy that you want them to have, right? So a lot of times clients will call in distress. And if a lawyer gets amped up by a client's distress, that client's distress stays here, right? And they get a satiation from the lawyer engaging with them, right? Anytime that I'm upset, I know my lawyer's going to be upset too. Right? I need somebody to be upset with me because my life is not happy right now, hence why I have a lawyer. But a lot of times, if your client is on 10 and you're on 2, you can bring them down to a 2. Okay. Now you might say, well, how does this relate to the idea that our current clients are repelling our ideal clients? Well, the ideal client for you might be somebody who schedules calls and waits for you to be available instead of somebody who expects you to be instantaneously available at all times for all reasons, no matter how big or small, right? Your ideal client might be somebody who has a legal problem and is in some form of legal distress, but is not likely to be in urgent legal distress without notice for, whatever reason, while you are in the day-to-day throes of managing other matters. It will depend, right? It depends on what's ideal for you. And that's really what all of this is about, right? You have to think about who you are currently serving, because if you are 1 minute serving the high octane person and the next minute serving the low keel person, well, that shifting back and forth that might be required if you're choosing to meet those clients where their energies are, something I don't recommend. I think you should be the leader of how energy is managed in your law firm, just as you should be the leader of how people are managed in your law firm, right? That's another topic for another podcast. But if ultimately you don't take the reins, then you're going to be having to deal with that shifting of energy that tends to wear us out, right? And that's the reason why ultimately you don't invite in those new ideal clients, because you're so in the energy of serving the folks that you are used to serving in a certain way that you don't really stop and pause and say, do I really want to serve these folks? Do I want to serve different folks, or do I want to serve folks in a different way? All right, everyone. I'm Allison Williams. Today, you have been listening to the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast, and we have been talking about the 3 ways that your current clients are killing your opportunity for your ideal client. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at lawfirmmentor.net, and I will see you on the next episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast.